The moment the alien enforcer struck the human child, everything changed. Not gradually, not subtly, instantly. The sound wasn't even that loud. A single sharp crack in the middle of a crowded market. But somehow, everyone heard it. And then, nothing. No voices. No movement. No negotiation. Just silence. The kind of silence that doesn't come from confusion, but from understanding. Because every species on that station knew exactly what that sound meant. They just didn't want to believe it had actually happened. An 8-foot Thorin enforcer stood in the center of the market district, armored plates glinting under station lights, his grip still tight around the arm of a small human girl. She couldn't have been more than 6. Her face turned slightly from the impact. A faint red mark already forming where his hand had struck her. She didn't scream. That was the worst part. She just cried quietly, like she didn't fully understand why it happened. And standing in front of her was her mother. Still, completely still. Too still. If you had never seen a human before, you might have thought she was frozen in fear. If you had read the cultural briefings, you would know better. Because humans don't freeze like that. Not when their children are hurt. That stillness? That isn't hesitation. That is calculation. That is the exact moment a human mind stops thinking about consequences and starts thinking about outcomes. The enforcer didn't notice. Of course he didn't. Because if he had, he might have let go. He might have stepped back. He might have realized that in that single careless moment, he had just made the worst mistake of his entire life. But he didn't. Instead, he tightened his grip on the child's arm and spoke. Certain. Completely unaware. She stole from a vendor. Like that explained everything. Like that justified it. Like that made it okay. The mother finally moved. Not fast. Not yet. Just one small step forward. And when she spoke, her voice was calm. So, controlled. Let go of my daughter. No shouting. No anger. No threat. Which, if you understood humans, was far more dangerous. Because anger can be negotiated. Fear can be controlled. But that tone? That quiet, steady, perfectly measured tone? That is what comes right before something breaks. The enforcer made his second mistake. He laughed. A low, dismissive sound that echoed just a little too loudly in the dead silence around them. The juvenile committed theft. I am authorized to... He didn't finish the sentence. Because the universe, in that exact moment, decided to remind everyone watching why humans are classified as a death world species. 1 second, the woman was 3 feet away. The enforcer's feet were no longer touching the ground. And just like that, the silence ended. Not with noise. Not with chaos. But with something far worse. Understanding. Because now, everyone could see exactly what was about to happen next. And nobody was going to be able to stop it. My name is Tokmar. And up until that moment, my entire existence had been defined by paperwork. 14 cycles as a compliance observer for the Galactic Council. 14 cycles of trade disputes, regulatory reviews, and incident reports that no one important ever read. If 2 species argued over shipping tariffs, I documented it. If a merchant filed a complaint about product quality, I processed it. If someone broke a minor protocol, I filed the appropriate violation notice and moved on. That was my job. Order. Structure. Predictability. Boring, but safe. Nothing unexpected ever happened on a station like Meridian 7. That was the entire point of stations like Meridian 7. Neutral space. Controlled environment. Carefully managed interactions between species that, in any other context, would probably be at each other's throats. Everything was monitored. Everything was regulated. Everything was stable. Or at least, that's what I believed. Until the humans arrived. When the Council approved provisional membership for humanity, the official statement described it as a calculated step toward broader interspecies cooperation. What that actually meant was that no one trusted them. Not fully. Not yet. Because humans weren't just another species entering the Council. They were a Category 9 Death World species. And that classification exists for a reason. Most intelligent life in the galaxy evolves on relatively stable worlds, predictable climates, manageable ecosystems, environmental conditions that don't actively try to kill you on a daily basis. Humans didn't. They came from a planet where survival itself is a constant struggle, where storms can erase entire cities in hours, where predators evolve specifically to hunt creatures just like them, where diseases mutate faster than most species can even study them, and where the gravity alone is enough to cripple off-world visitors without mechanical assistance. By every known model of biological development, humans should not exist. And yet, they didn't just survive. They adapted. They endured. They built. And eventually, they left that world behind and stepped into the wider galaxy like it had been waiting for them all along. That made them unpredictable. And unpredictability makes bureaucracies nervous. So the Council did what it always does when faced with something it doesn't fully understand. It created protocols. Dozens of them. Human interaction guidelines. Cultural sensitivity briefings. Behavioral risk assessments. Entire volumes of documentation explaining, in precise and careful language, exactly how to deal with humans in a controlled and professional manner. I read all of them. Every page. Every clause. Every warning. And there were warnings. Clear ones. Repeated ones. The kind that don't usually appear in official council documents unless something has gone very wrong in the past. Humans, the briefings said, exhibit extreme protective behavior toward their young. Humans respond to perceived threats with disproportionate force. Humans, when emotionally compromised, may ignore standard diplomatic constraints. It was all very clinical, very measured, very distant. Like reading about a theoretical hazard that you will never actually encounter. Like reading about a storm while standing in clear skies. You understand the concept, but you don't feel the danger. Not really. Not until you're standing in the middle of it. And at that moment, in the silent center of Market District 7, watching an 8-foot enforcer suspended in the air by a human woman half his size, I realized something. The briefings hadn't exaggerated. If anything, they had been far too gentle. Because they described human behavior. They didn't describe what it feels like to be on the receiving end of it. Behind me, I could hear movement. Subtle. Careful. The crowd wasn't dispersing. No one was leaving. They were stepping back. Creating space. Instinctively. Like prey animals recognizing the presence of something dangerous and wanting distance when it finally strikes. And so, no one spoke. No one intervened. Not even station security. Because every being in that market, no matter how different their species, their culture, or their laws, understood one very simple truth in that moment. This was no longer a situation governed by protocol. This was something else. Something far older, far more primal, and far more dangerous. I should have said something. I should have asserted authority. De-escalated the situation. That is what I was trained to do. That is what my entire career had prepared me for. But as I stood there, watching the human woman's grip tighten slightly around the enforcer's throat, watching his armored body struggle against a force it clearly did not understand, I found myself thinking something I had never thought in 14 cycles of service. Not about regulations. Not about procedure. Not about consequences. But about survival. Because for the first time, I wasn't observing an incident. I was standing inside one. And deep down, I had the distinct and overwhelming feeling that things were about to get much, much worse. There is a difference between reading about danger and recognizing it when it is standing right in front of you. The council briefings tried to explain humans in terms we could understand. Strength ratios, environmental adaptation, behavioral tendencies. All very precise. All very controlled. All completely insufficient. Because humans are not dangerous in the way most species are dangerous. They don't rely on natural weapons. No claws designed to tear through armor. No venom. No built-in biological advantages that would immediately mark them as predators. At first glance, they look almost unimpressive. Average height. Soft skin. No visible defenses. Nothing about them suggests what they are capable of. And that is the first mistake everyone makes. Because humans don't win through biology alone. They win through persistence, through endurance, through something far more difficult to measure. They survive things that should kill them. They adapt to conditions that should break them. And when pushed, when something crosses a line they consider absolute, they don't just react. They escalate. Completely. Relentlessly. Without hesitation. The council learned that the hard way. Long before Meridian 7, there had been another Deathworld species admitted into preliminary contact. The Gonuts. On paper, they were impressive. Physically dominant. Highly aggressive. Apex predators by every known standard. The council believed they could be integrated, managed, controlled through proper diplomatic channels. They were wrong. 3 diplomatic delegations disappeared before anyone understood what was happening. By the time the truth came out, it was already too late. The Chronox didn't negotiate. They hunted. And the council had nearly paid for that mistake with an interstellar war. After that, protocols changed. Screening became stricter. Risk assessments became harsher. And when humans appeared, the council was very, very careful. Or at least, they thought it was. Because humans didn't behave like the Chronox. They didn't attack without reason. They didn't treat every interaction like a dominance display. They were cooperative, polite, even friendly. They traded fairly, communicated clearly, followed agreements. They learned languages faster than expected, adapted to multi-species environments with surprising ease. They seemed almost too reasonable, too controlled, which made it easy to forget what they actually were. Until moments like this. Until the mask slipped. Until something triggered that part of them that had been forged on a world where weakness meant extinction. I watched the enforcer struggle in the woman's grip. His armored plates scraped faintly as he tried to pull free. His size alone should have made that impossible. He outweighed her by at least 3 times. His species was built for combat, designed for dominance. And yet, he couldn't move. Not an inch. His feet hung just above the ground. His breathing already turning uneven. His hands slowly reaching toward his sidearm. That was his 3rd mistake. Because the human woman saw it. Of course she did. Humans notice everything when they are focused. Especially when that focus is directed at a threat. Her free hand moved. Too fast. Faster than my eyes could properly track. There was a sharp, cracking sound that echoed through the market. The enforcer's arm jerked violently. Then went still. Bent at an angle that arms are not meant to bend. The sound didn't just break the silence. It shattered it. A few beings in the crowd flinched. One of the smaller species actually staggered backward. No one intervened. No one stepped forward. Because now the situation was no longer unclear. Now everyone understood exactly what they were witnessing. This wasn't an argument. This wasn't an arrest. This wasn't even a confrontation anymore. This was a demonstration. A very clear, very controlled, very deliberate demonstration of what happens when you hurt something a human considers theirs. The woman finally spoke again. Her voice had changed. Not louder, not angrier, just sharper, focused, like a blade that had been carefully drawn. She adjusted her grip slightly. The enforcer made a strained, choking sound. Just made a very bad choice. And for the first time, the enforcer looked afraid. Truly afraid. Because in that moment, he realized something that everyone else in that market had already understood. This was no longer about authority. No longer about law. No longer about control. He wasn't dealing with a civilian. He wasn't even dealing with a hostile. He was dealing with something far worse. The human, who had just been given a reason. And the most dangerous thing in the galaxy is not a predator. It's not a weapon. It's not even a Deathworld species. It's a human who believes they are justified. Behind me, I finally heard it. The distant sound of security forces moving through the corridor. Too slow. Far too slow. Because by the time they arrived, this situation was already past the point where anyone could pretend it was under control. And something told me, this was only the beginning. I don't remember deciding to move. One moment I was standing at the edge of the crowd, frozen between protocol and instinct. The next, I was pushing forward, forcing my way through bodies that parted just enough to let me pass, but not enough to suggest anyone actually wanted to be closer to what was happening. Close. It was worse. The enforcer, Dravix, was still suspended in the air. 8 feet of armored muscle, reduced to something disturbingly fragile in the grip of a human woman who looked calm. That was the detail that refused to make sense. Not rage. Not chaos. Control. Absolute control. Her daughter was pressed against her side now, one arm wrapped protectively around the child, holding her close without looking away from Dravix for even a second. The girl's small hands clutched tightly into her mother's clothing. Still crying. Still quiet. It cut through everything. Because it didn't belong in a place like this. Markets were supposed to be loud. Busy. Alive. Not like this. Not silent, except for the soft, broken breathing of a child who didn't understand why she had been hurt. You are going to let him go. I didn't recognize my own voice at first. Too tight. Too controlled. But it was enough. The woman's eyes shifted. Locked onto me. And for a moment, I forgot how to think. I had seen predators before. Real ones. Creatures that evolved to kill. I had stood in rooms with beings capable of tearing me apart without effort. None of that prepared me for that look. Because this wasn't hunger. This wasn't aggression. This was judgment. Cold. Precise. Measured. She wasn't reacting. She was deciding. Deciding what happened next. Deciding how far this would go. And somewhere in that decision, I realized something that made my entire body tense. If she chose to escalate, there was nothing in that market that could stop her. Security is on the way, I added quickly. Not a command. Not really. More like a suggestion. An attempt to reintroduce structure into a situation that had already slipped past it. We can resolve this appropriately. For a second, nothing happened. No movement. No response. Just that stare. And then, slowly, she exhaled. Not relief. Not surrender. Control. Reasserting control. Her grip loosened. Just slightly. Then she released him. Dravix dropped. His knees hit the ground first, followed by his hands as he tried to catch himself. The impact echoed louder than it should have. Or maybe everything just felt louder after the silence. He coughed. Gasped. Dragged in air like he had forgotten how breathing worked. The crowd shifted again. Not closer. Never closer. But something had changed. The tension didn't disappear. It condensed. Focused. Because now everyone was waiting to see what happened next. The woman didn't step back. Didn't retreat. She adjusted her hold on her daughter, lifting her fully into her arms with a gentleness that felt completely disconnected from what had just happened seconds earlier. Her hand moved to the child's face. Careful. Checking. Reassuring. Soft words, too quiet for anyone else to hear. And just like that, the predator was gone. Replaced by something else entirely. Something protective. Something human. Then she looked at me again. My name is Kelly Winters. Her voice was steady. Perfectly level. Like we were having a normal conversation. Like an 8-foot enforcer wasn't still on the ground behind her trying to breathe through a crushed throat and a shattered wrist. My husband is Commander Marcus Winters of the Earth Defense Exploration Fleet. There was the shift. Not emotional. Not physical. Political. And suddenly, this wasn't just an incident anymore. It wasn't even a crisis. It was a problem with consequences. Serious ones. He is going to want to know about this. Every part of my training told me to respond. To reassure. To contain. To control the narrative before it spread beyond this market. But before I could say anything, before I could even form the words, I felt it. A cold, sinking realization settling into place. Because I knew that name. Everyone on Meridian 7 knew that name. The Earth Defense Exploration Fleet. EDF. 3 of their ships had docked at the station less than a cycle ago. Officially for patrol coordination. Unofficially, as a reminder. A very quiet, very controlled reminder that humans did not enter new territory unprepared. And now, one of their commander's children had just been struck by a council enforcer. In public. In front of witnesses. I swallowed. I am certain we can resolve this. I'll be in my quarters. She cut me off. Not aggressively. Not loudly. Just decisively. Like the outcome had already been determined. She shifted her daughter slightly against her shoulder, turning away. Then she paused. Just long enough to glance back. At Dravix. Still on the ground. Still trying to recover. He should start running. No emotion. No threat. Just a statement. And somehow, that made it worse. Much worse. Then she walked away. And the crowd parted instantly. Not out of respect. Not out of courtesy. But out of instinct. Like something deep and ancient was telling them. Get out of the way. Do not stand between that human and whatever comes next. I stood there for a moment longer, trying to process what had just happened, trying to figure out how to contain something that already felt completely out of control. Behind me, Dravix finally forced himself to his feet. Unsteady, breathing rough, his broken arm hanging uselessly at his side. You saw that, he snarled, voice strained but filled with anger. She assaulted an officer of the council. I want her detained immediately. I turned to look at him. Really look at him. At the marks forming along his throat. At the way he struggled to stand straight. At the situation as a whole. And in that moment, the truth became painfully clear. This wasn't about arresting a human. This wasn't about enforcing protocol. This wasn't even about justice anymore. Because what had just happened in that market was bigger than all of that. Much bigger. What I saw, I said slowly, was you striking a child. Dravix opened his mouth to respond, but I didn't let him. And what I see now, I took a breath, is the beginning of a situation that is going to get very, very difficult to contain. For a second he just stared at me, confused, angry, still not understanding, still thinking this was something he could control. That was his final mistake. Because at that exact moment, security forces finally arrived. And with them, the consequences. And something told me, this wasn't going to end with a simple report. Not even close. Security didn't rush in. That was the first thing I noticed. They slowed down. You could see it the moment they entered the market district. Alert. Trained for conflict. And yet, hesitant. Not because they didn't understand what had happened, but because they did. Very clearly. Security Chief Morvin Khaled stepped forward, his expression tight, all four of his eyes narrowing as he took in the scene. Dravix. Injured. The crowd. Silent. Standing too close to the center of it all. And the human woman. Already gone. What happened? He asked. Not casually. Carefully. Choosing each word like it might trigger something if placed wrong. Before Dravix could speak, I answered. Enforcer Dravix used physical force against a human minor. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't add emotion. Just the facts. Precise. Unavoidable. Khaled's eyes shifted to Dravix. Slowly. And for the first time since this started, I saw uncertainty on a security officer's face. Not doubt. Not confusion. Recognition. You struck a child? Khaled asked. Dravix straightened slightly, ignoring the obvious pain. She committed theft, he snapped. I acted within my authority. You struck a human child? Khaled repeated. This time, slower. More deliberate. Like he needed to hear it clearly. Like he needed confirmation of something he already knew was a problem. A serious one. Dravix hesitated. Just for a fraction of a second. But it was enough. Yes. That single word landed harder than any impact in the last 10 minutes. Because now it wasn't speculation. It wasn't interpretation. It was confirmed. Official. Documented. Khaled exhaled. Controlled. Then he looked at me. Not as a superior. Not even as a colleague. But as someone who had just been handed a problem with no clean solution. You filed the report? He asked. I will, I said. That was enough. Because we both understood what that meant. Once it was filed, this wouldn't stay on Meridian 7. This would move. Upward. Fess. And when it did, it would bring attention. The kind of attention no station wants. Medical team, Khaled said without looking away from Dravix. Get him stabilized. 2 personnel moved forward immediately. Careful. Professional. But even they kept their distance. Not from Dravix. From the situation itself. From what it represented. Dravix didn't resist as they began treating his injuries. Didn't argue. Didn't protest. Which told me something important. He still didn't understand. Not fully. He thought this was about the assault. About his injuries. About the human woman. He still believed this was a contained incident. A disciplinary issue. Something internal. Something manageable. It wasn't. And he was about to find out just how wrong he was. Confine him to quarters, Khaled ordered. Dravix's head snapped up. What? His voice sharpened despite the strain. She attacked me. I am the one who... You struck a human child, Khaled cut in. Final. No one is making decisions until this is reviewed at a higher level. Dravix stared at him. Disbelief turning into anger. Then something else. Something quieter. Something colder. You can't be serious, he said. Khaled didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at me again. And I knew exactly what he was thinking. Say it. Confirm it. Make it official. So I did. Article 12. Section 4. I pulled up the file on my tablet, the text already burned into my memory from hours of compliance review. Violence against minors of any recognized species by council personnel is grounds for immediate disciplinary escalation and external review. I paused. Just long enough. Then added. The Human Integration Treaty designates such incidents as high-priority violations. Silence again. Not the same silence as before. This one was heavier. Because now, everyone understood the scale. Dravix's posture shifted. Subtly. The confidence draining out of him as the reality began to settle in. This is excessive, he said, but it lacked conviction now. It was a minor infraction. The child was 6, I said. Quite precise. And that ended it. Completely. Because age matters. Context matters. And humans care about both more than most species ever will. Khaled gave the order with a slight motion of his hand. Take him. The medical team didn't hesitate this time. Dravix didn't resist. Not anymore. As they led him away, I watched his expression shift. Anger fading. Replaced by something far more dangerous. Realization. Too late. Far too late. Because this was no longer about what he did. It was about what it meant. And what it meant was that somewhere on this station, a human mother was already making calls. A human father was already being informed. And somewhere far beyond this station, systems were already moving into place. Quietly. Efficiently. I turned back toward Khaled. How long? I asked. He didn't pretend not to understand. How long until this becomes something we can't control? Khaled was silent for a moment. Then he gave a small, humorless exhale. Too late for that, he said. And then, as if the universe itself decided to confirm it, my communicator activated. Not a standard alert. Not a simple notification. A priority override. The kind that bypasses every filter. Every delay. Every layer of protocol. It didn't beep. It screamed. And before I even looked at the display, I already knew. This wasn't over. Not even close. In fact, this was exactly where things started getting worse. I didn't want to answer it. For a fraction of a second, I actually considered ignoring the call. Pretending I hadn't seen it. Delaying it. Buying time. Because somewhere deep down, I already knew who it was. And I knew that once I answered, there would be no slowing this down. No containing it. No rewriting what had already happened. The communicator screamed again. Louder. More insistent. Priority override doesn't ask. It demands. So I answered. Observer Tokmar, I said, forcing my voice into something resembling control. There was no introduction. No greeting. No wasted movement. Just a voice. Measured. Precise. Station administrator. Every muscle in my body tightened, because I recognized that tone immediately. Not from experience. From briefings. From recorded communications. From the kind of voices you study, because one day you might have to deal with them. I would like to file a formal complaint, the voice continued, regarding the assault of a member of my family by one of your enforcers. Commander Marcus Winters. There was no doubt. No hesitation. No room for interpretation. He wasn't asking what happened. He already knew. And that was a problem. A massive one. Because it meant the information had moved faster than protocol. Faster than containment. Faster than we could control. I glanced at Khaled. He didn't speak. Didn't need to. His expression said everything. Handle it. Carefully. Commander Winters, I said, choosing each word with surgical precision, the situation is currently under review. The enforcer involved has been confined pending. Confined to quarters. He didn't raise his voice. Didn't interrupt loudly. He just corrected me. Like he was adjusting a minor detail. Like the distinction mattered. And somehow, it did. How interesting. That word, that single word, carried more weight than anger ever could. Because anger can be unpredictable. This wasn't. This was controlled. Calculated. Evaluated. Tell me, observer, Winters continued, his tone almost conversational now, if I were to walk into your home and strike one of your offspring, what would your response be? The question hit harder than any accusation. Because it wasn't rhetorical. It wasn't dramatic. It was direct. And it forced a comparison I couldn't avoid. I hesitated. Just for a moment. And that was enough. Exactly, he said quietly. No accusation. No escalation. Just confirmation. Because my silence had already answered for me. Behind me, I could feel Khaled shift slightly. The tension in the room tightening like something about to snap. Commander, I said carefully, we are following established council protocol for incidents involving use of force. The appropriate disciplinary procedures are already in motion. I understand protocol perfectly, Winters replied. And there it was. That shift again. Subtle, but unmistakable. I understand that your systems require time. Review. Evaluation. The pause. Not long. Just enough. But from where I am standing. His voice dropped slightly. Colder. One of your officers struck my 6-year-old daughter. No emotion. No raised tone. Just facts. And somehow, that made it worse. In public, he continued. In front of witnesses. Another pause. And your response is to send him to his room. No one spoke. Not me. Not Khaled. Not anyone within range of that transmission. Because there was nothing to say. Nothing that would make that sound acceptable. Nothing that would make it right. Commander, I started again, pushing forward because silence wasn't helping anymore. What outcome would you consider appropriate in this situation? It was a risk. A calculated one. Because asking that question meant giving him control of the narrative. But not asking it would be worse. Winters didn't answer immediately. When he did, there was something different in his tone. Not anger. Not frustration. Decision. I would consider it appropriate, he said, for Enforcer Dravix to be formally charged, tried, and sentenced under council law. Khaled exhaled quietly beside me. Barely noticeable. But I heard it. Relief. Because that was reasonable. Measured. Contained. We can arrange, I began. I would also consider it appropriate, Winters continued, not even acknowledging my response, for him to be permanently removed from any position of authority over civilians. Especially minors. Still reasonable. Still controlled. Still within bounds. And that was almost worse. Because it meant he wasn't reacting. He was thinking. Strategizing. Positioning. This can be discussed, Khaled said carefully, stepping slightly closer so his voice carried into the communicator range. We are prepared to. I should also inform you, Winters said, cutting across him without raising his voice even slightly, that my wife has already contacted Earth. Silence. Total. Absolute. Because that changed everything. And Earth, he continued, has contacted the human diplomatic mission. The pause. Longer this time. Heavy. And the diplomatic mission has invoked Protocol 7. For a second, I forgot how to breathe. Protocol 7. I had read it. Of course I had. Every compliance officer had. Was one of those clauses you study and secretly hope you will never see activated. Because Protocol 7 wasn't a guideline. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a line. A very clear, very deliberate line. What does Protocol 7 authorize? Khalid asked slowly. He already knew. But he needed to hear it. Out loud. Officially. It authorizes the deployment of a human military tribunal, Winters said. Controlled. Final. To investigate and prosecute crimes against human citizens within council space. The words settled over the room like pressure. Heavy. Unavoidable. Because that wasn't just escalation. That was precedent. That was power. That was humanity saying, if you fail to protect us, we will do it ourselves. Khalid didn't speak. I didn't speak. Because there was nothing left to say that wouldn't make this worse. And somehow, I understood something in that moment. Something the council had completely failed to grasp. This wasn't about revenge. We would already be dealing with something far more violent. This was about something else. Something far more structured. Far more dangerous. Accountability. Human accountability. And the worst part? This wasn't the peak. This wasn't the explosion. This was just the warning. Because if this was how humans responded with control, I didn't want to imagine what happened when they stopped holding back. For a long moment, no one spoke. Not me. Not Khalid. Not even the background systems that usually hummed with quiet activity throughout the station. It felt like everything had slowed. Like the entire station was waiting, holding its breath, for what came next. Because Protocol 7 didn't just change the situation. It rewrote it. Completely. Commander, Khalid started carefully, choosing his tone with extreme caution. A military tribunal operating within council jurisdiction would create complications. That depends, Winters replied. Still calm. Still controlled. On whether you intend to resolve this, or explain it. Khalid didn't answer. Because that wasn't a question. It was a line. A very clear one. I stepped forward slightly. Not because I wanted to, but because someone had to say something. If we proceed with full cooperation, I said, forcing clarity into my voice, and apply maximum disciplinary action under council law. I hesitated. Just briefly. Would that influence the tribunal's assessment? There was. The real question. Not how to stop it. That was already impossible. But how to survive it? Winters didn't respond immediately. And in that silence, I felt something shift. Not in the room. In the situation itself. Because up until now, everything had felt like it was building toward violence. Toward retaliation. Toward something explosive. But this felt different. Deliberate. Measured. When he finally spoke, it confirmed it. The tribunal is already in motion, he said. No hesitation. No negotiation. It will arrive. The pause. But that word landed harder than anything else he had said so far. Because that word meant possibility. It meant control. It meant outcome. If the council demonstrates full cooperation, he continued, and applies appropriate legal consequences without delay. Another pause. I will recommend leniency in their final assessment. Leniency. Not forgiveness. Not dismissal. Leniency. That distinction mattered. A lot. Because it meant this wasn't about punishment. Not entirely. It was about something far more structured. Balance. Cause and effect. Action and consequence. Human law. And suddenly, I understood why the council had been so uneasy about humanity from the beginning. It wasn't their strength. It wasn't their aggression. It wasn't even their unpredictability. It was this. This ability to take something emotional, something volatile, something that should have spiraled into chaos, and turn it into something controlled, directed. I looked at Khalid. He looked back at me. And without a word, we both reached the same conclusion. We had already lost control of this situation. The only thing left was to manage the damage. We will cooperate fully, Khaled said. From no hesitation. Dravix was finished. We both knew it. There was no version of this where he walked away with his position intact. No version where this stayed internal. No version where this was quietly buried under paperwork and procedural language. This was bigger than him now. Much bigger. Good, Winters said simply. And for the first time since the call began, there was the faintest shift in his tone. Not warmth. Not relief. But something close to satisfaction. Not because he had won, but because the system was working. Exactly as intended. I will be in my quarters, he continued. With my family. A subtle emphasis on that last word. Family. A reminder. A boundary. You will notify me when the tribunal arrives. We will, I said. Because at this point, there was no alternative. The connection ended. Just like that. No dramatic finish. No final threat. Just silence. But this time, it felt different. Heavier. More defined. Because now we knew what was coming. And there was no stopping it. Khaled exhaled slowly. All units, he said, activating his command channel, this incident is now classified as high-priority diplomatic risk. All reports go through compliance. No external communication without clearance. Efficient. Controlled. Too late. I turned slightly, looking back toward the direction Kelly Winters had gone. Toward the quiet residential sections of the station. And for a brief moment, I thought about what had just happened from her perspective. Her child had been hurt. Struck. In a place that was supposed to be safe. And her response had not been to demand destruction. Not to call for retaliation. Not to escalate into violence. She had trusted the system. But she hadn't trusted it blindly. She had ensured it would work. And that was the difference. Humans didn't avoid conflict because they were weak. They avoided it because they preferred control. Structure. Outcome. But when that structure failed, they didn't panic. They adapted. They enforced it themselves. Better. Stronger. More completely. I felt a slow, creeping realization settle into place. Something that made everything we had been taught about humans feel incomplete. We had prepared for their aggression. We had prepared for their strength. We had prepared for their unpredictability. But we hadn't prepared for this. For a species that could take something as chaotic as anger and turn it into something precise. Something legal. Something unstoppable in an entirely different way. And suddenly, the idea of a human military tribunal arriving on this station felt far more terrifying than any act of violence ever could have been. Because violence ends quickly. This was going to be thorough. And something told me, when it was over, everyone on Meridian 7 was going to remember exactly what happens. When you cross a human line. The tribunal arrived 3 days later. Not with noise. Not with force. Not with anything that resembled intimidation. Which made it worse. Much worse. Their ship docked without ceremony. No escorts. No visible weapons. No dramatic announcement. Just a standard arrival clearance. And then they were there. 5 humans. All in uniform. All moving with the same quiet precision that I had come to recognize as something far more dangerous than aggression. Because aggression can be resisted. This couldn't. I was assigned to observe the proceedings. Of course I was. By that point, my name was already attached to the incident. My report had been filed. Reviewed. Forwarded. And now, it was evidence. The hearing took place in the central chamber. Every available seat was filled. Representatives from half a dozen species. Security personnel. Administrative staff. Observers. No one wanted to miss this. Because this wasn't just a trial. This was a demonstration. And everyone knew it. Enforcer Dravix stood at the center. Stripped of armor. Stripped of presence. For the first time since I had seen him, he looked smaller. Not physically. But in every way that mattered. Across from him stood the lead prosecutor, Colonel Mara Hunt. If you had seen her outside this chamber, you wouldn't have noticed her. She was older. The kind of person who would blend into a crowd without effort. Which made what happened next Even more unsettling. Because from the moment she began speaking, she controlled the room. Not loudly. Not aggressively. Completely. State your name for the record. Dravix complied. His voice lacked the confidence it once had. Enforcer Dravix of. Former enforcer, she corrected. Softly. Not a challenge. The fact. And just like that, the tone was set. This wasn't a defense. This wasn't a negotiation. This was a process. Structured. Precise. Unavoidable. The evidence was presented. Efficiently. Video recordings from the market. Witness accounts. Medical reports. Every detail laid out with clinical clarity. There was no rush. No pressure. No theatrics. And that was the terrifying part. Because there was no room to argue against it. No angle to twist. No narrative to reshape. Dravix tried. Of course he did. It was a minor infraction, he said at one point. The child committed theft. I acted within council authority. And striking a minor is standard procedure? Honest. Still calm. Still controlled. No, but... And the level of force applied? Was it necessary? Silence. Not dramatic. Not forced. Just silence. Because there was no correct answer. Not anymore. The entire defense collapsed in moments. Not through aggression. Not through pressure. Through inevitability. Through the simple, relentless presentation of truth. I had seen interrogations before. I had seen legal disputes. Nothing like this. Because this wasn't about breaking someone down. It was about removing every possible escape. Every justification. Every excuse. Until the only thing left was reality. And reality was not on Dravix's side. The trial lasted 2 days. 2 days of the same precise dismantling. Every argument met with facts. Every claim met with evidence. Every attempt to justify, quietly, efficiently erased. By the end of it, there was nothing left to defend. Nothing left to argue. Nothing left to hide behind. And when the verdict was finally delivered, there was no suspense. No tension. Because everyone in that chamber already knew what it would be. Guilty. The word landed without force. Without emphasis. It didn't need either. Because its weight came from everything that had led up to it. Guilty of assault of a minor. Guilty of abuse of authority. Guilty of violation of Council Human Treaty provisions. Each charge read clearly. Deliberately. Final. Dravix stood motionless. Whatever resistance had once been there was gone. Completely. The sentence, Hunt continued, is as follows. And this was where everything shifted again. Because this was the moment everyone had been waiting for. The moment where humans would reveal what they really wanted. Punishment. Retribution. Something severe enough to justify the tension that had built over the past 3 days. The room held its breath. Even I found myself leaning slightly forward. Waiting. Expecting something extreme. But what came next was something no one had anticipated. Enforcer Dravix is stripped of rank. Expected. Permanently removed from council service. Still expected. Sentenced to 5 cycles in a rehabilitation facility specializing in behavioral correction and cross-species interaction protocols. That was not what anyone expected. A ripple moved through the chamber. Confusion. Disbelief. Because that wasn't vengeance. That wasn't destruction. That wasn't even particularly harsh by some species standards. It was measured. Controlled. Deliberate. Additionally, Hunt continued, the subject is permanently barred from any position involving authority over minors of any recognized species. Final. Complete. Precise. No excess. No emotion. Just outcome. And in that moment, something shifted. Not just in the room. In understanding. Because this wasn't weakness. This wasn't restraint. This was something else entirely. Something far more unsettling. Humans didn't need to destroy their enemies to prove a point. They needed them to understand. To live with it. To carry it. To remember. I looked around the chamber. At the faces of the observers. At the subtle reactions. The unease. the quiet realization spreading through the room. Because everyone had expected violence. Something explosive. Something easy to categorize. This was harder. Because it meant humans weren't unpredictable. They weren't reckless. They weren't driven purely by emotion. They were controlled, structured, and absolutely committed to enforcing their version of justice. And that made them far more dangerous than anyone had prepared for. The tribunal concluded without ceremony. No celebration. No lingering presence. They had come for a purpose. They fulfilled it. And then they left. Just like that. Efficient. Final. I remained in the chamber long after it emptied, trying to process what I had just witnessed, trying to reconcile what I thought I knew about humans with what I had just seen, because the truth was becoming very clear. We hadn't misunderstood humans. We had underestimated them. Completely. And the worst part? This wasn't even the end of it. Because 3 months later, I got promoted. And that was when things actually started getting complicated. Much more complicated. Promotion, as it turns out, is not a reward. It is a warning. I should have realized that the moment they handed me the new assignment. Senior Compliance Observer. Oversight of Human Integration Protocols. Across 6 stations. 6. Not 1. Not a controlled environment like Meridian 7. 6 different locations. 6 different populations. 6 different opportunities for everything to go catastrophically wrong. My predecessor didn't even try to hide it. He handed me the files, wished me luck, and left. Actually left. Retired on the spot. I remember watching him walk down the corridor, faster than someone his age had any right to move. And halfway to the lift, he started laughing. Not normal laughter. The kind that comes from someone who has seen something and survived it. Barely. That should have been my first real warning. The second came 3 weeks later. Station Vorgel 3. Distress signal. Urgent. Incomplete. We have a situation. I hate that word. Because situation never means something manageable. It means something has already gone wrong and is about to get worse. Much worse. By the time I established full communication, the details were already bad. By the time I heard the rest, I realized we were already past the point of control. Raiders. 15 of them. Organized. Holding 47 hostages. 8 of them human children. That number, that specific number, changed everything. Because I already knew what it meant. I had seen it before. I had read it in every briefing. I had felt it in that market on Meridian 7. Humans can tolerate risk. Humans can tolerate loss. Humans can tolerate uncertainty. But human parents? When their children are involved, there is no tolerance. There is only action. And the worst part? They had already decided. When I arrived at Vorgel 3, I didn't walk into a crisis. I walked into a countdown. 24 human parents. All in one room. All completely silent when I entered. That silence was worse than shouting. Worse than panic. Because it meant they weren't emotional anymore. They were focused. And focused humans are the most dangerous version of them. We're done waiting, one of them said. Controlled. Final. That tone again. I had heard it before. Right before something irreversible happened. I tried reason. Protocol. Delay. Reinforcements were coming. 12 hours. Just 12. But the deadline? 6 hours. 6 hours between diplomacy and something far more violent. And then someone asked me a question. Simple. Direct. Do you have children? And in that moment, everything shifted. Because this wasn't about law anymore. It wasn't about treaties. It wasn't about jurisdiction. It was about something much older. Something deeper. Something no system in the galaxy could override. I have a plan, I told them. And I did. A good one. Logical. Structured. To negotiate. Delay. Extract a few hostages. Buy time. Wait for military support. The kind of plan that works. In every simulation. In every textbook. In every controlled scenario. It failed in less than 3 minutes. The raiders refused to release the children. And the moment that happened, I saw it. Not anger. Not rage. Decision. Cold. Immediate. Unquestionable. Time's up. That was all they said. No debate. No hesitation. No looking to me for approval. They had already moved past that. And that was the moment I realized something critical. You cannot control humans in that state. You can only choose one thing. Stand in their way. Or stand with them. Anything else is irrelevant. So I made the only decision that might keep people alive. I said. And I meant it. But I also knew I had just crossed a line that would follow me for the rest of my career. What happened next was not chaos. That's the part most people get wrong. They imagine a reckless charge, a desperate attack, something emotional, something messy. It wasn't. It was precise, planned, executed with a level of coordination that rivaled trained military units. Because half of them had military experience. And the other half were human. That was enough. 9 minutes. That's how long it took. 9 minutes to breach a fortified position. 9 minutes to neutralize 15 armed raiders. 9 minutes to extract 47 hostages, including every child. 0 casualties. Not one parent lost. Not one child harmed. When the human military finally arrived, it was over. Completely. I gave my report. Every detail. Every decision. Every moment. I expected consequences. Disciplinary action. Career termination. Something. Said. The commander looked at me and laughed. Not mockery. Not disbelief. Recognition. You understood them, she said. That was it. That was the difference. Not intelligence. Not strategy. Understanding. Because that's what the council had been missing from the beginning. They tried to control humans. Regulate them. Contain them. But humans are not something you contain. They are something you align with. Or you get out of the way of. There is no middle ground. Months passed. Reports were filed. Protocols updated. New training implemented. They even named a procedure after me. The Tokmar protocol. I still don't know how I feel about that. But I understand why it exists. Because someone had to write down the rule that everyone had just learned the hard way. And the rule is simple. So simple it almost sounds ridiculous. Until you see what happens when it's broken. Do not threaten human children. Not because they will destroy you. Not because they will go to war. Not even because they are stronger than you. But because they will not stop. They will not hesitate. They will not negotiate beyond a certain point. And they will do it intelligently. Legally if possible. Forcefully if necessary. But always effectively. I still have the drawing. Hanging on my office wall. A child's version of me. For legs. Poor proportions. Bright colors. And above it, written in uneven lines. Thank you for keeping us safe. I've received commendations. Promotions. Recognition from species I didn't even know were aware of my existence. None of it matters as much as that drawing. Because that drawing represents something the council took far too long to understand. Humans are dangerous. Unpredictable. Sometimes. Difficult. Boys. But they are also something else. Something far more important. They are loyal. To a degree that borders on absolute. And if you stand with them, truly stand with them, they will do something no other species in this galaxy can match. They will protect you. With the same intensity, the same focus, the same unstoppable force that they use to protect their own. And that is why they are worth it. Every risk, every complication, every situation. But never give them a reason to turn that protection into something else. Because I have seen what happens when you cross that line. And I promise you, you will not forget it. Neither will anyone else.